recording. All right, welcome everybody to today's Salt Lake City HubSpot user group event. We are so thrilled to be back with you guys today for another awesome event. This time we're thrilled to have Jason Azcar. He's the founder and CEO of HubSearch, a firm that recruits top talent for HubSpot partners and customers, here to discuss how to turn HubSpot into a career. My name is Darren Burnson, but everybody calls me Doc, and I'm the owner of Burnco Media, a certified HubSpot partner agency that focuses on revenue operations strategies using HubSpot CRM platform. And I'm also the president of the Utah Digital Marketing Collective here in Utah. Let me also introduce Brandon Carter. Brandon and I have been co-leaders of the HubSpot user group since its inception back in 2015. Brandon is at another HubSpot certified partner agency called Digital Reach, where he serves as the marketing automation director. If anybody here needs help with your HubSpot, feel free to reach out to myself or Brandon at any time. We'd love to see how we could possibly help you out. And since we're online today, please keep in mind we are recording, so please act appropriately. If you are on video, if we end up bringing you on later in the show, and general chat and DMs with other attendees is on. So remember, always be kind and be helpful. Questions during the presentation, please go ahead and use that Q&A panel so we can keep them separate versus just the chat section, and we will address those either during the show and or at the end. But this is going to be a fairly fluid, open conversation the whole time, so feel free to ask your questions. And also, real quick, our agenda, we just got a little bit of welcome and housekeeping with myself. And then we'll be turning it over to the conversation of the day, turning HubSpot into a career with Jason, and then we'll also have some more time for Q&A wrap up at the end. Goals for our HubSpot user group here in Salt Lake City, since most of us here are actually not from Salt Lake, but if you ever want to plug back in, we'd love to have you. Frequency of our events, we will always have at least one minimum event per quarter through the end of the year. And we also might have additional workshops and intensives online as well. And Brandon's going to discuss intensives in 1 second. But again, these events are just for you, HubSpot users. We're definitely not here to sell anybody. And this is a learning environment, and we are here to help. So Brandon, how about you take a second and discuss intensives work?
Yeah, I apologize for the wheezing that my computer is bringing to the recording, but intensive. So with a HubSpot user group, we kind of have two goals. One is to keep the community informed about all the latest things that are happening within and around the HubSpot platform, and broader topics like today, where we're talking about, the transition of HubSpot into like a RevOps career platform. But we also want to talk about, like, a lot of people come to Hugs because they're using HubSpot and they've got questions or they've got like problems that they're running into. So to kind of scratch that itch, we host regular intensives, and these are small group sessions. We cap it at 10, but generally we will have like 6 to 8 people who show up to these. The idea is you come with your problems that you're facing within HubSpot, and you're going to have 7 or 8 other people who can help you with that, whether that be emailing, lead nurturing, workflows, CRM, whatever it may be. Like, there's no judgment, there's zero pressure. Basically, the idea though is like, bring your problems and bring your expertise. So while you may have a question about your lead nurturing system, you might also be able to help someone out with using the ads tool, for example. So it is some people may call it like a mastermind type thing. We're not that formal about it. It really is just 8 to 10 people sitting around the table virtually, with their laptops open. Of course, laptops are open. We're not in person anymore. Anyways, basically, like, with your HubSpots pulled up, talking about things, sharing ideas. And anyways, we are hosting one on July 22nd from 11:30 to 1 p.m. I should add that is Mountain Time. This group here, the attendees today, will have kind of first dibs at RSVPing. We'll share that link toward the end of today's conversation. We'll also share it out in the email that is sent out following this event. So again, just to like summarize, we'd love to have you. It is like hands-on HubSpot help from people that, people like Doc that have been doing it for a long time. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so here's a preview of our next one. Basically just open laptops, no judgment, no pressure. Just show up, be ready to help someone with their problem and get some help with your problems or your questions. And we'd love to have, if we could just get like the 12 people here, that would be a ton of fun. We'd love to have you. So plan to RSVP for that.
Yeah, that's the link on the screen there, but don't worry about writing that down. We'll go ahead and get that shared out, and then it'll be out in the email. But it is first come, first serve. Please make sure if you do reserve your spot that you do attend, because we only have those spots open. So if you're 100% sure you can make it, please RSVP. All right. So also, just want to make sure everybody realizes that Inbound is coming up in October. And no, it is not in person again this year. It's going to be virtual only. As a reminder, tickets are on sale, so prices go up again after July 15th. So right now they're at $89. So be sure to get yours today. Check out inbound.com. Also, because I'm working at with the Utah Digital Marketing Collective, I wanted to make you guys aware. We also put on awesome events there every other week online. So I'd like to invite anybody here who'd like to be come in and actually learn from an awesome CEO of Markups. His name is Shibu Mitra. He's going to be talking about how marketing organizations and what it is that they need to do to drive growth. So it's going to be a fantastic event. You can jump over to our website there and learn more about the event. But again, it's online, it's free. Come join us. We'd love to have you. And last, we're always looking for guests to present at our HUG event. So if you've got a cool case study or a topic that you'd like to present on, please let myself or Brandon know so we can get you on the books. We'd love to have more folks come on and share their success stories with everybody. So that'd be fantastic. Let us know. Lastly, if you didn't know, which you guys probably don't know because most of you are here from out of state, but we also actually have a Slack channel. So if you'd like to join our Slack channel and be able to help and or learn from other HubSpot users in between events, direct message myself or Brandon on Twitter or DM us here on Bevy, and we can get you added to the HubSpot group community on Slack. All right, so with that being said, hopefully everybody's ready to go. Sorry for the long intro, but again, one more time, please participate today, ask questions. We'd love to even bring you up on camera if you'd like to as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get this event started. Brandon, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so a little bit of background. And some of you who were, hanging out with us before we got started here heard a little bit of this conversation, but I was saying about 10 years ago, I took a job with a company who had 2 full-time Salesforce people. Literally, they spent all day in that platform, and I was a marketing generalist. And like a lot of the people here, or at least a lot of the people that have come in and out of our user group over the years, most of them wind up using HubSpot because they're a marketing generalist. Back in the day, HubSpot basically marketed themselves that way. Like, hey, here's a tool that's going to help you do all the marketing things, and you don't have to sit in it full time. You don't have to have a full-time HubSpot person the way that you do Salesforce. And it worked for a long time, but then HubSpot kept adding complexity. They added the CRM, they added like more marketing tools, the CMS, they expanded that capability, the Service Hub. Now, fast forward a few years, like I would say circa 2016 or 17, HubSpot was big enough and doing enough in most organizations to where it needed a babysitter. So a full-time admin. Now, that is actually starting to come to fruition. I took my first full-time HubSpotting job in 2017 and was blown away at the idea that like all I have to do is sit in here and like take care of HubSpot stuff all day. Like, how much fun is that to those of us, to someone like me that's a geek about the platform? That felt a little bit early. Now we're in 2021. Organizations that use HubSpot have figured out that they need someone that sits in there full time. I'm betting, and I would love to actually do a quick poll of the people that are in here. How many of you are HubSpot users who are considering a career in it full time versus how many of you are in leadership roles where you're looking to hire someone to run your HubSpot? If you could chime in the chat, that would be great. But that's the background. Like we're at a point now where HubSpot needs full-time professionals in general. the guy who we have brought on here, his name is Jason Azcar. He is the founder of a firm that does exactly that, that helps place HubSpot professionals with companies that need a HubSpot professional. I'll let him introduce himself, but what we're going to talk about today is we're going to look at it from both sides. If you are, and thanks for chiming in, everybody. It's great to see some of the different perspectives that we're going to address here. On one hand, we're going to talk about if you are looking to hire a HubSpot person, what should you expect? Like, what are the roles that they should be fulfilling in your organization? What's a good pace, like a pay range for these people? What does a job description look like? On the other hand, if you are a HubSpot professional or like a marketing generalist who's using it part-time, really enjoys it, it looks like we might have connections happening in there already. If you are a HubSpot person who geeks out on it like me, but I have like 10 other roles. I was, in charge of social and pay-per-click and content and the website, but I really like enjoyed the things that happened in HubSpot. If you are in that position and you're looking to get a role, we also want to talk to you a little bit and talk about like what's reasonable. Like, how do you find these jobs? How do you get connected with someone like Jason? How do you what kind of salary should you expect? So that's the big overview. And this is, a pretty significant topic. We're talking about a sea change in how like HubSpot works in like who is sitting in it, who's in charge of it. So with that, I want to bring in Jason. I want to introduce Jason Azcar from HubSearch. Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself and about HubSearch.
Sure. Thanks, Brandon. That's an awesome intro. Really excited to have the chance to present here and talk to you guys today. So I'm Jason, founder and CEO at HubSearch. So we're the only recruiting company globally that's hyper-focused on HubSpot. So all of our clients, every company that we work with has to use HubSpot, right? So that's really two groups, HubSpot partners and HubSpot customers. And we're the first company to really live in this niche. And I've been drinking HubSpot Kool-Aid for a long time. So I was a HubSpot employee from 2012 to 2015. So I was super fortunate to lead the tech recruiting team in Boston for 3 years. It was a blast. Obviously, I loved it because it's now become the thing that our whole business is based around. And Brandon, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about, for a bunch of years, HubSpot didn't need an admin. Right. It was one tool in a multitude of tools that a marketing and sales organization was using. And it's drastically changed, right? The CRM, the introduction of the CRM was probably the demarcation point, right? It started to get so popular, so well adopted, that HubSpot clearly started to really focus on that part of the business. And it's been so cool to see the evolution where it hasn't been all that long that HubSpot's talked about themselves as a CRM company. Right. For a bunch of years, they very specifically didn't talk about themselves in that way. Right. Because the tool set wasn't ready. It wasn't sophisticated enough. And they didn't want to compete with Salesforce. Right. They very clearly wanted to say, hey, Salesforce, you do your thing. We're going to live in this space and we can coexist. And it's only been, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe not even, maybe like a year before HubSpot came out and said, we're a CRM platform and we're going to be the number one.
I don't think it's been that long.
Has it not even been that long? Maybe it was this year.
No, it was this year. They made the official announcement.
Yeah, right. They came out and said, we're going to be the number one CRM for scaling companies. That's a seismic shift. First time in HubSpot's existence that they're saying, Salesforce, we're coming after your business, right? Specifically in small and medium-sized business areas, right? Enterprise TBD in years to come. But and it's been the thing that's driven our business, right? I mean, HubSearch is a reasonably new company, been around for like 19 months. And really the thing that caused us to build this organization was the fact that I was blown away when I realized no one had done this, right? My first hire, our head of client services, Megan Prescott, when we had this idea, we're like, there's no way, someone must have built this thing already. We did a whole bunch of research and it didn't exist, right? And like we were talking about before we officially launched, this model, this recruiting organization specifically tied to a software platform exists for other platforms. Salesforce is the perfect example. There are a couple of agencies, like really big, successful recruiting organizations that just do Salesforce. and nobody had applied that model to HubSpot for obvious reasons, right? HubSpot wasn't ready. And now that HubSpot is finally at the point where it's a product that runs your business, right? It's no longer a niche tool that does one or two things. It's the thing that you run your business on. There's enough opportunity in this space to have a recruiting organization wholly devoted to it.
I would like, before we get into, like hiring someone and firing jobs, I'd like to dig in a little bit more about HubSearch. And tell me, like, who's typically hiring you? Is it partner agencies? Is it like in-house roles? Like who seems to be on the lookout for HubSpot?
Yeah, great question. So very much both, but that has evolved over our lifespan. So when we first went to market, we said we are just for the partners, right? Like our first tagline was something like built for the partners. And the idea was we're going to be hyper niche and really just become the go-to recruiting organization for HubSpot partners. And it was a smart place to begin. Like, and I spent a lot of time early on pitching CAMs at HubSpot, right? Because I wanted referrals from CAMs. And we started to gain traction really quickly. And what we started to see was these agencies, the partners, right, frequently would come to us and say, hey, our client is desperately struggling to hire. Can you help these guys out? And we said, well, sure. They're a HubSpot customer? Sure. Yes, we're trying to build a business here. Yes, that sounds like a great opportunity. So we opened it up to any company that uses HubSpot. And that has been probably 8 months for us and has just poured gas all over the fire that has become HubSearch. I mean, it has really driven growth. We're at 12 members of the team right now and looking to substantially grow that number. We're going to be at probably 16 over the next several months. The partner network is amazing. That will always be a primary focus of ours. It's something I'm personally super passionate about. We are partners, granted a very non-traditional partner, but there's something like 2,300 partners in the US, right? There's like 40,000 HubSpot customers in the US, right? So it's a much, much deeper pool on the other side of it. So a long-winded answer to say that it's very much both HubSpot agencies and any company that uses HubSpot.
So I've got a question. So, I mean, really the way that now kind of seems to be the marketer's world. I mean, we live in a very marketer-friendly world, less so friendly for the companies that are hiring them. There seems to be, 10 jobs for every 2 people available to fill the roles.
Yep.
And so just kind of curious to get your take on just that, because, you see a lot of people looking for a different job, or you're starting to see salaries jump higher. It seems like maybe there's as much, I don't know, either flexibility in a career at a specific company, or at least enough in terms of the job descriptions are just so, you have to do every kind of a role. And so not being very specific about, okay, you're going to be focusing in the email part of the tool, you're going to be focused on something else. Somebody in here was chatting earlier, like we asked, like, what was their specific role within the company? It's like all of it. So it's like, are we starting to see like HubSpot get broken down into more, almost like HubSpot? I mean, you look at HubSpot's roster, and those people are in the CRM, and that's all they work on, or they're in sales, and that's all they do, or they're in the marketing, or just email, and that's all they do. So curious, just overall throw up thought there, and just see what you have to say about that.
It depends on a couple of things. I think that some of the commonalities that we see, in-house roles for HubSpot pros, you're probably the generalist, right? You're running HubSpot. So you've got to be broad. Your skills have to be broad across. You got Marketing Hub, CRM, Service Hub, maybe CMS. Like there's got to be broad experience across the platform. Likely more specialization at agencies, especially as agencies get up beyond 10, 12, 15 people, right? The agency clients that we work with are much more likely to say, hey, I need a CRM integration expert, because we're going to put this person on all of our HubSpot CRM projects for our clients, or, an SEO PPC expert, et cetera. But we definitely see it both ways.
Pollyanna has a question in the chat, but before we get to that, is in your opinion, and this is maybe a question for you too, Doc, like, is HubSpot still reasonable for the like lone marketer or the generalist? Like, can it still be an effective platform without having someone that just babysits it full time, in your opinion?
I'm gonna let Jason take that one, then I'll give you my 2 cents on it.
When you say the lone market, you're talking like agency of one?
Agency of one, or like the marketing team of one. Like I mean, I would say like where I started with HubSpot, where I'm doing email, I'm doing the blog, I'm managing the website, the pay-per-click, and HubSpot was like just a great tool to help me, push those things forward. But like you risk at some point the HubSpot CRM getting unwieldy, or like inevitably marketing generalists will suffer with things like organization and things like
Sure.
that. I don't know. What's your opinion on it?
I mean, this is going to sound like a little bit of a homer answer, but I think HubSpot's the ideal tool for that use case, right? Because assuming you use a CRM, right? If you're at a company that's like, we don't need a CRM, then maybe you don't need something at the scale that HubSpot has gotten to. But if you know you need marketing automation and you know you need a CRM, I don't think there's a better choice.
Sorry,
I
was going to give you my 2 cents. I mean, I think that it's an interesting question in that I think it depends on the size of the business, and I think all what's going on. And I kind of like even jumps into Pollyanna of like, how do you know when you need to have somebody full time or whatever? I think it really depends on the size of your business. If you're a small company and you really have a small team and you don't have that, many marketing things that are happening, or a very small sales team, I think you can get away with having somebody, that's full time, that's dedicated to running it. But the big trick is now is that you've got to be so wide, and you've got to be able to understand not just the marketing thing and email things, but you also need to understand how that all ties into sales and sales pipelines and all the way to the end. Then you've got the where you might be working, like on my side, when I'm working with clients who've got Salesforce as well as HubSpot, and they're trying to tie those two things together. Or it's a larger company like a SaaS business or a startup who's well-funded or something along those lines, where they have a large or fairly large sales team, but a very small marketing team, which is always the case. And then they're wondering why we're not getting all the things moving that we need to move. So I think that strategically, and I think we'll touch on this a little bit later, but I think the way that HubSpot has kind of now repositioned themselves, and as they're really starting to push like this whole RevOps concept, where you've pretty much got revenue operations that kind of either is at the same level or maybe a step above, like marketing, sales, and service operation teams, but really like a strategic role within the company that would actually be able to talk in all three and align everybody and make sure that whatever's going on within HubSpot and or any other platforms that you might have attached to it are actually going to work well together. So I would say that I think it just depends on size of company, whether you're an agency or whether you're just a B2B or a B2C company. It just depends on really size and where you're at and what your goals are, and when you're going to need to hire somebody. But when you just, I don't know, I guess it's kind of a hard question to answer that specifically. I don't know what you think, Jason. Like, how do you know, or when do people come to you most? Like, what's their pain point where they say, "Oh my gosh, I've got to hire somebody"?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, it depends on a bunch of things. Let me give you my take. So I personally think, and HubSpot probably wouldn't love me saying this, but the days where you don't need somebody focused on HubSpot are gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
You either need an agency or an in-house person. It's got to be one or the other. I can't tell you how frequently we talk to clients who go, "We bought HubSpot a year and a half ago. We're using 10% of it." I'm like, what an incredible waste of not only resources, but opportunity, right? I mean, you think of all the business you could have taken advantage of, all the cool stuff you could have been doing in the product you're already paying for if you've been using it even at 50% of its capacity, right? So generally the way we talk about it is, if you don't know if you need a full-time person yet, go engage with an agency, right? Go pick up a retainer with a good HubSpot partner. It's not going to be cheap, but it's going to be a little bit less than a full-time hire, probably. And if and when you get to the point where you felt like you've outgrown that relationship, then you're ready for your full-timer.
Yeah, I recommend for my clients that they have my agency plus someone full-time. Like it makes it easier from an agency perspective too.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That's another really common use case we see is that I talk with a founder who's saying, I am the point of contact for my agency and I just can't do it anymore. Right? We actually hear that a lot. In fact, we hear from the other side also. When HubSpot partners refer us through to their clients, often it's that use case. We're dealing with a founder. We've got 15% of that person's time and brain energy. It's not working. They need someone to become our point of contact.
So there's a couple of questions in the chat related to RevOps, and I've heard it referenced a couple of times here. Can we step back and like what is RevOps and how is that different than say like sales or marketing ops? Like, Jason, you want to talk about like because HubSpot's beating this drum hard. Like what is
Sure. So when I think of RevOps, historically companies have had systems professionals tied to functions, sales, marketing, customer success, right? So a lot of organizations would have a systems and operations person siloed to each one of those teams, which is useful, but definitely not the best way to do it, right? There's all sorts of friction and gaps between those teams. So the general idea of RevOps is make that one person or a team that's responsible for the operations and the systems and the data and the processes that tie all of that stuff together as you think about how the organization generates and tracks revenue.
And like, how many companies are doing this? Like, are you seeing RevOps titles or people like if I'm, someone that's watching this and maybe I'm the VP of marketing and I want a HubSpotter, is that a situation where like I'm gonna hire a HubSpotter but put like a RevOps title out there? Like it's the scenario.
Actually less common than I would have thought. I wrote a blog article at the very beginning of this year saying something like, I think RevOps is going to be our number 1 search this year. And it hasn't happened yet. We're running one right now, and I think we've done 2 this year. And by the way, nobody was even using this word a year ago, right? So it's like it is definitely starting to creep in. I'm surprised it hasn't picked up more quickly.
Brandon can attest to this. I mean, him and I literally probably for the last 3 years have been talking about this role. We didn't know it was going to be entitled RevOps, whoever picked it up, but this role was going to be needed. We knew that even as agencies, myself as an agency or him back in the day when he was in-house, you can only go so wide in the platform without letting something slip. And again, it's like, are you the sales leader within the organization and you're really only working sales functions, but is that marketing person who's really understanding how everything is aligned to sales or sales and marketing teams aligned? Are we all working to make sure service and everything works? So we've been talking about this for years because we knew that we've seen it in Salesforce land and Marketo land, where these Marketo companies are charging like $10,000 a month just to make sure companies Marketo doesn't break, or whatever the case is. And while HubSpot, for the most part, has been way easier for people to set up, to the detriment of people who have bought HubSpot, in my opinion, directly from HubSpot, is that it was always sold about how easy HubSpot is. And anybody can run it. And it's so simple to do. But at the end of the day, it's not that it's not simple to do. It still takes strategic planning to make it run. It's still so much of an empty box that you still need your own customized blueprint to make it work for you. So that's the biggest thing that I've noticed is that, especially with the market that we're in right now, where we're seeing people jump from company to company and new people coming in to take over for pre-existing work inside of a HubSpot, you always end up finding where the challenge is that, somebody built HubSpot one way, somebody else comes in and wants to build it another way. Then there's that whole downtime. Oh, then they want to switch to Salesforce because they're just mad at it or something along those lines. So it's just kind of like, it's just a weird mix of just like so much stuff going on right now. And that's why this topic today is just so important. So we can kind of dig into why and how we can do it better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think even though the RevOps title wasn't a thing, I think there were a lot of people that were basically doing that job, right? I mean, if you were the HubSpot admin for your organization, you could make the argument that you were essentially also the RevOps person, right? Because at the end of the day, you're running the system that manages marketing, sales, customer success, sort of.
I think this is a good transition into like the makeup of a HubSpot professional. And it's also related to a couple of questions in the chat. Like, all right, what's on the job description? Like, what should a RevOps professional, and maybe let's just assume that that's kind of the same thing as a HubSpot professional. Let's just combine those. Like, what does it look like? What are the skills that they need to have? What is fair to ask of, you know, someone that if you're looking to put a hire and you have those job descriptions or those requirements, like what should you be looking for?
I think for the RevOps role in particular, I think that the most important skill is mastery of the technology, right? I don't want to make it sound like strategy isn't important, right? The more strategic your brain is, the better. But really the most critical thing is mastery of the tool set. Like you have to be the marketing and HubSpot technologist. Right? You've got to really understand what every button does, what implications it has on downstream functions. You've got to know the platform inside and out. I think the thing that we see pretty commonly is that a RevOps person will be associated to a strategist, whatever the titles end up being, right? You've got some head of marketing who has a RevOps person on their team, right? So a RevOps person, a RevOps professional would be involved in strategy, but is probably not the person defining strategy and then also implementing that full strategy in the tool. That's an awful lot to ask of one person. So generally RevOps is more tied to systems and technology skill.
And what are some of
and not only that though too, but not just the HubSpot technology, but now connections that are you can connect on top of HubSpot. So you have to be able to you have to really understand just technology in general and understand how all the products and platforms talk. So, you know, the whole MarTech stack, really. And I agree with you. I mean, I think that you could separate that. You almost need somebody separate to run strategy and someone else to figure out how to make it work, kind of a thing.
I mean, that's the ultimate unicorn person, right? It's like, hey, and we hear it, by the way, we hear that all the time. That we get that ask all the time. Like, hey, we need a brilliant strategist who is also technical, who can write code and on and on and on. I'm like, okay, guys, hang on. You're talking about three people. But I think you make a really good point in that it's not just about HubSpot, right? It's got to be the MarTech stack. We still, and I'm sure we will for a bunch of years, we hear all the time, hey, how the heck do we best tie Marketing Hub to Salesforce? Right. And of course, my follow-up question is always like, why? Why don't you just use the HubSpot CRM? And it's usually, I mean, sometimes it's a good answer. Sometimes like, hey, we needed this HIPAA compliant thing and HubSpot doesn't offer that yet, whatever. But much more commonly it's, well, we paid a bunch for Salesforce 9 years ago. It was customized to us and we don't want to rip it out.
Yeah. The other thing, fully agree, you know, like from my perspective, you know, as a director at a partner agency, I mean, obviously I look for number one, HubSpot mastery. Not like, and one of the reasons I think this is turning into like a full-time career is like, there's not really like, there's very few mastery unicorns. Like I'm as comfortable in the Marketing Hub as I am in the Service Hub, in the back end, you know, using like Hubble or HubDB or like now with Operations Hub, you've got this whole need for like, you know, not need, but the opportunity for someone that knows like JavaScript to be able to like expand that functionality. Like I look for someone that's as close to that as I can. But I also try to hire marketing generalists, people who have come from a role where they had to do something else. And HubSpot is something that they stumbled into and was like, oh, well, this makes more sense to me. Like,
yeah,
operating in here makes sense because like I was in charge of reporting or I was in charge of attribution or the blog at my company for a number of years. So like, but one of the questions in the chat was, well, do I need a web developer? Like, or does this person need to be a web developer? My instinct, and I'd like to get your feedback on it, is like, no, but they should probably have a little bit of familiarity with like some like HTML and maybe like SEO best practices, like you're more front end kind of thing. Like, is that fair to ask of your HubSpot person?
You hit the nail on the head, right? When we have this conversation and somebody starts to cross the border from like a really skilled HubSpot technologist into developer, it's fair to ask your HubSpot person to be able to look at some HTML, CSS and know what's going on, right, have SEO best practices. The minute you start to cross into like building JavaScript from scratch, you've gone into developer land. And obviously anything beyond that, any sort of back-end dev language, of course, now you're talking about a developer, right? I have this conversation with candidates all the time. I'm like, look, if you could add anything to your skill set, like go learn some HTML and CSS, it's going to make you so much more dangerous, because are you going to build complex apps from scratch? No. But can you look at a website at a very granular level and make changes, modifications, tweaks, really get complex in the CMS? Yeah. And then you pull in a dev something.
And I'd maybe only add that, like, if you're using HubSpot as your CMS, maybe your RevOps guy has understanding of how that CMS works from a deployment standpoint. If you guys were doing anything technology wise, from like, what am I trying to think of? Where you do the custom pages based upon the visitor. My brain just died, but being able to do some of that kind of stuff from a marketing standpoint. But really, no, I think like Jason was saying, it's really a separate role. That's the biggest part, and I think that can kind of maybe even move us into that topic of like, what are the biggest challenges that companies are having with hiring? Because it just almost seems like no matter what the job title is, from entry level to management and everything in between, it always feels like the job listing is the same listing with a different name, with basically unicorn stuff where they want you to do paid, they want you to do the organic, they want you to do the website. Yeah. They also want you to run the email campaigns and be a master of it all, no matter what the title is. So, I mean, how do we fix this? How do we help companies and or help candidates be more in line with what the positions that running a HubSpot system really needs?
Yeah, it's a great question. We do so much consulting to our clients on this. We call them kitchen sink descriptions, and it happens all the time. And I mean, I get it. You as an employer want the person who's going to be able to cover the most ground, because what you don't want to do is have to hire two people, right? Because obviously then you're talking about twice the cost. But companies do themselves such an enormous disservice when they build those types of job descriptions. It doesn't prompt applications. It does the exact opposite. You have a bunch of people who you probably would have loved to interview, who are reading this description and going, this isn't quite me. I'm opting out. I'm not going to apply because I don't think I'm perfect for that job. But I think job descriptions generally are written very poorly, right?
And you have to have a 2-year bachelor degree and 5 years of experience. And
like I tell our clients all the time, you need a job description should be two things. Have your internal document that talks about all the skills this person needs, right? Which is what most people go out and then post to the world. That's not for the eyes of the world. That's for you to manage expectations of your interview team and make sure you guys are like interviewing on the same things. The thing that goes to the world is a piece of marketing collateral. Put a beautiful piece of collateral out there that makes people want to engage with you, right? It's a piece of inbound content. And for the life of me, I don't get, like, even inbound agencies don't seem to be able to or haven't been able to wrap their heads around this largely. It's like you're turning a lot of people off with these types of job descriptions, and the people who you would have loved to interview, but maybe had 4 years and not 5 years, like you said on your job description.
This is an interesting, I had a conversation with a guy who was looking for HubSpot. He was looking for HubSpot help a couple of weeks ago. And he was like, well, would you be interested in it? He asked me, and I was like, well, I've been in the platform for 10 years. He was like, oh, well, that's way more senior than what I'm looking for. Like, I'm looking for someone that's got 5. And I'm like, dude, 5 is also a senior person.
Exactly. Right.
If you're looking for someone that's got 5 years in HubSpot, like, that's going to be a senior person. Like, this as an industry is really only become a thing like less than 5 years ago. And like, it's, you need to, like, I think it was a very eye-opening conversation for both of us, because for him, he was thinking, well, 5 years of marketing automation experience, that's junior. I'm like, no, that's not.
No.
Couldn't agree more. The years of experience thing in our world is really interesting, right? It's like you can be a senior person in this world with 2.5, 3 years of experience. I mean, if it's been really specifically targeted experience, I mean, a senior HubSpot expert by definition really can't have more than 10 or 12 years of experience, because before then the product was so vastly different. Like, it's not the same thing. So, when we can talk about this when we get to, like, I'm happy to talk about like the pay rates and stuff we see. But when we talk to our clients, we're like, look, senior doesn't mean 15 years in this world. It just doesn't. Senior probably means like 3 or 4 years.
And I do want to jump into salaries, but or like pay range and what's fair, what's happening right now. Before that, real quick, how can someone who's hiring a HubSpotter effective, like what kind of questions or what needs to be expressed to be able to tell someone that knows it versus like an imposter, or someone that has like taken the certification and has that box check but doesn't really, like, how do you suss that out?
There's a bunch of good stuff out there. So we've got a bunch of cool stuff on our blog that talks about this on the HubSearch blog. HubSpot themselves actually built a really nice piece of collateral. It's like the 100 best HubSpot specific marketing interview questions. It's beautiful, right? Whenever I do interview coaching with our clients, I always talk about, make sure you're doing interview questions with levels, right? So for example, do you know the CRM? Yes or no? Okay, level 1. Cool. Tell me about a time when this thing took place. How did it happen? What was the scenario? What happened? How did you deal with it? Okay, great. Level 2. Level 3. Once you fixed it, how did you future-proof it? What did you report on? Right? When you put together the presentation to your executive team, what did you talk about? I think so commonly in interviews, they're yes or no questions. Hey, do you know the Marketing Hub? Yes, I do. Okay, great. You're our person. And it can go on the inverse. Hey, are you a Marketing Hub expert? Well, no, not really. You might be an 8 out of 10. And now all of a sudden you've got some sort of misnomer on your skill. So there's a bunch of stuff. Like, it's for me, it's really about situational and evidence-based interviewing, right? Tell me about a time when this specific thing happened to you, or when you had to deal with this thing. Okay, and if this happened, what would you do? Right? Kind of get somebody mentally clicking through the tool. Make sure they can walk through it with you.
Is it common, or are you seeing any instances where a company may be asking for, like, well, show me, like, build something for me? Like, are you seeing that? Yeah. And as a candidate, is that something that should I be like, no, I don't want to do free work for you?
Yeah. So there's a 2-part answer here. We have companies that ask all the time for people to share some of their HubSpot work. And it never gets to our candidates because we say, but they obviously can't share their proprietary, their company's HubSpot portal. Of course, they can't share that, and they can't take screenshots. So that's not going to work. There's stuff that makes sense to go into a portfolio. HubSpot specific work, right? The way you click around in a tool isn't one of those things. And we do see, I actually tell clients this all the time. It's like, you can ask someone to do theoretical and like situational work during a screen share. It's not okay to have someone to go do some free work for you and then present it back during an interview.
Real.
Got it.
And honestly, it happens. It's not super common, but there have for sure been some companies that we've interacted with that when we really get into the weeds, we're going, are these guys just looking for some free work out of candidates? Because that's what it feels like.
That's a good question, Fly. I like his question here. He says he's got a HubSpot sandbox app with examples of his work. Should he not show that if he's asked for examples or screenshots?
It totally depends on what's in there. If that information belongs to your employer, for sure, don't show that stuff. That's putting you in a risky spot. If it's your data, go for it. Yeah, if it's data that, for sure. That's actually a really cool thing to be able to take to an interview.
Yeah, and I recommend
very few candidates have that.
People that I've talked to, like people that I mentor or help, I encourage them to don't necessarily like pull up your HubSpot or your employer's HubSpot, because you're getting into a gray area. But if you have like diagrams or a lucid chart or something like that shows like, well, this is what my workflow looks like, or this is typically how I set something up, like that will usually suffice if you can walk someone through it. So All right, we're starting to run up on time. This has been great, and I want to be sure that, like, if we have time for anyone that has questions. If you do have questions, throw them in. We're not using the Q&A; just throw them in general. We'll see it. Go for it. I want to talk about quickly titles and salaries.
Yeah, cool.
So, and I know this is like, I'm just curious. There are in-house roles and there are partner roles. Like, what are the typical titles that people are hiring for on each side?
Yep.
Are they like directors or VPs or just like special?
So one of the things that actually makes our jobs as recruiters in this space a little tricky is that titles are completely non-deterministic, right? Like the exact same human being doing the exact same work could have 5 different titles at 5 different companies, right? Like a strategist could also be an account manager, could also be an account executive, could also be a director of marketing. Like it could be the exact same job. So that's one of the things that actually makes recruiting in this world a little tricky. Titles are so across the board. In the agency world, a lot of what we work on is helping agencies build delivery pods, right? So you've got a strategist, you've got a marketing technologist, and then you've got a content creator. Those are probably the most common. Your technologist could also be called a marketing manager, an automation manager, automation expert, whatever. There are so many words that describe these things. So titles are tough in this space, but generally it's below director, right? We do see director and VP searches on a fairly regular basis, but generally that stuff is more about like, can you really effectively run a P&L? Can you go hit business acquisition targets? It's less about like, can you do really effective, interesting work in HubSpot?
Those coming, like where now you're going to have a like VP of RevOps. Like I get that there's probably those for enterprise companies, but do you see it becoming more common? Like where I need a HubSpotter, but I need someone that's senior.
Yeah, I think agencies are most likely to need that first, right? Agencies that want to go to market and say, we've got serious depth and skill in RevOps. Check out how amazing our head of RevOps is. Book that person for they're going to use it as a selling tool. They're going to use the title as a way to say, look how amazing this person is that we have on our team.
So what are people being paid? Like what's let's just say, I know you can't give specifics, but like what is senior and junior in-house versus like senior and junior in partners? Like are those similar or where just the ranges?
Yeah, I should have brought a link to this. We did a LinkedIn campaign recently for candidates that actually shared a graph of what we see in the market. And I can follow up and send that to you guys. But we see some really interesting stuff, right? And unfortunately, one of the common things we see is that agencies are way underpaying their people. There's a lot of them aren't, but a lot of them are. And it's not malicious. It's not necessarily taking advantage of people. It's just that this market has changed drastically in the last several years, right? Like you could pay somebody who knew HubSpot pretty well. Let's say they're 2 years out of school. They know HubSpot pretty well. 4 years ago, you could pay that person $55K. That is absolutely no longer the case, right? And I'll share some of our business practice. Like we haven't set it as a hard floor, but we are very hesitant as an organization to take on searches at less than about $65K at this point. Because once you start to get down below that, and it has nothing to do with revenue, it's all about expectations. Once you start to get down below that number, we find that expectations are wildly misaligned, right? And we find that in our world, anything from like totally entry level at, let's say 45-ish up to about 65K-ish, it's 20 grand, which isn't an enormous spread, but those are vastly different people. I mean, what the amount of skill and value you can add to a company 2 years into this thing is much more valuable than 20,000 in salary, right? So what we get into this weird thing where at 60 to 65, you're a senior junior person, if that makes any sense, right? And once you start to get into like 65 to 70, you've got a couple of years under your belt. You've done interesting, meaningful, impactful work for your business. You're more mid-career, right?
And is this this is on the agency side you're talking about, right?
Yeah, this is
not in-house.
This could probably be applied to both, but it's more on the agency side. Yeah, I think in-house you're likely to make a little bit more. depending on a whole bunch of factors. But in-house roles are probably going to pay slightly more. Agencies just tend to be on the lower end of pay rates.
Yeah.
So we'll see, like, I hate the term junior, right? Because I don't know, I don't love it. Call it like early career is something like 50 to 65 ish. Mid career is like mid 60s to probably mid 80s. And then once you're senior, right? And one of the ways that we define senior is, can you do all the things you need to do in HubSpot? Can you be the technologist? And now, do you also have one foot in strategy? If not both of you, right? Can you now on the agency side, or I guess on the agency side, can you get with a client? On the in-house side, can you get with your COO and help those people define strategy, then go back and do the work in HubSpot, right? That's when you start to become senior in this world. And that's mid 80s up through about 120-ish.
Do you find is that like, how is that? I mean, you don't recruit for marketing specific roles per se, but do you know, like, how is that shifting? Like, is a HubSpot specialist now more valuable than like a marketing generalist? Say that they're at the same career level?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Those numbers I gave you are for people who know HubSpot, right? If what you need is a marketing generalist, 50-55 gets it done. That same person with a year and a half, like let's say it's a year and a half person, right? The same person who's been in HubSpot for a year and a half is making 10-15% more.
Wow.
There is such a shortage of HubSpot platform skill in the market right now.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, that's a big part of why we exist, right? And why we've grown so quickly is that companies are struggling to find and hire people who know HubSpot. Just posting a job no longer works, right? Because the people who know HubSpot, it's this whole idea of recruiting super passive candidates, right? They're not out there applying because they don't have to be. They're doing cool work for an interesting company making good money, right? Which is why it's very hard to go hire those people, especially if you're only doing inbound recruiting. You have to go get them. You have to do candidate activation and talent discovery, like all the stuff we do as outbound recruiters.
Will it last?
Oh yeah.
Will this HubSpot thing last?
Yeah. Like, is this now? Like, is it going to be?
Yeah. I think we're seeing with HubSpot the same thing that Salesforce went through.
Yeah.
Right. You can make an awful lot of money as a Salesforce professional.
Yeah.
We're not quite there yet with HubSpot. I mean, Salesforce admins are charging $200 an hour for consulting work. It's crazy, and they're incredibly well paid in agency and in-house. And we're starting to see HubSpot get to the point where they're going to have this own ecosystem of true platform experts are in extraordinary demand. And I think it's only going to continue to increase, especially on the CRM side. I threw a post on something that Dharmesh had put out on LinkedIn not too long ago, and he commented back. He's like, if I could give a fresh grad any piece of advice right now, it would be learn the HubSpot CRM.
Yeah. Because
you could for sure make a career out of helping organizations implement, set up, manage the HubSpot CRM.
So Fly just made a nice comment where he's saying, hey, it's nice to be in demand. And I think this is the one thing that I think and I do believe most of the people who were in there earlier answered that they were in-house more so than at agencies. But I think that's the one thing that I don't know that people in the HubSpot world really understand, is that they really are in demand. There is so much opportunity. And I think it's almost kind of like what the housing market is doing right now, right? It's like there's not enough houses, at least I know in Utah, and my house just went up like crazy in value, and I could probably sell it tomorrow in 30 seconds. But the point of the matter is that it's the same thing with us in HubSpot land. There's so many people and so many companies who need us. But the other challenge that I see is that I don't know that either us as partners, maybe even you as a recruiter, or even internally, I don't think that a lot of companies have set themselves up for knowing that they should have them be in demand, and that these roles are just as important as hiring your 10 sales guys a month and running your CRM plays and all this other stuff. The marketing side is the one side of the business that traditionally been a little bit ignored a little bit, and or they were the ones who were always in trouble if something didn't go bad, and they're the first ones to get fired. I think now that when you have like a RevOps type role, or even if you don't need RevOps yet, all these things that intertwine the business together and understanding how all that works, and especially if you're using HubSpot as a platform to run your business, I mean, dude, it's a different market now. And so I think companies somehow need to be retrained on how and why they need to hire the right people and set the right expectations. Because oftentimes I just see it like where you see these crazy job posts come through. Again, like I said, they want the unicorn, but I think they're just borrowing somebody else's job template and posting it for themselves. Then they hire the person and then they say, all right, get to work. But there's really no real direction, and then still things kind of end up going bad. So who ultimately owns HubSpot? Is it the person that hired them, or are they coming in to own it? And if they are, holy cow, I mean, you could get yourself to be in so much demand, and then hopefully not canned when people need to reduce budgets down the road.
You're describing half the discovery calls we do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so frequently we talk to organizations with and they don't love our answers, but we tend to be super, super candid. We're just like, your expectations are wildly unrealistic, right? Like not only is one person not going to come in with all these skills, but to the point earlier, you're hurting your own recruiting efforts by even having this thing out there as a post, because it's not realistic. And candidates look at this and go, no one can do this. I'm by applying, I'm setting myself up for failure. That is like the worst possible thing that a candidate could feel when looking at your job description. It happens all the time.
Jason, this has been fantastic. We are coming up on it. Super useful information. Real quick, where can people find you, whether you're looking for a HubSpot job or you're looking for a HubSpot professional? Like, where do they start? Where do they come to you?
Yeah. HubSearch.com is always the best place to find us. If you're a candidate looking for a position, reach out to me directly. It's Jason at HubSearch, or there's a candidate specific form on our site. Even if you're not looking now, we tell this to people all the time, because we deal with a lot of people who aren't actually looking for positions. Like, everybody needs a good recruiter in their corner, right? Even if it's just, hey, what are you seeing in the market? That's why we exist. We're a sounding board on what we're seeing in the market. And if you get to a point where like, God, I really think I should change jobs, well, fantastic. You've got a recruiter in your pocket.
Awesome. So do you you work on both sides. You're working with the companies and the agencies, but you're also working with the HubSpot experts who are looking for opportunities and maybe helping them shape maybe their resume or whatever that is.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so.
That's fantastic. Any last second questions before we end the recording? We'll stick around for a couple minutes after if there was something anybody else wanted to ask at that point. But is there anything we want answered live right now? Do you do any interview coaching?
Very much so.
Question?
Once we're working with somebody and we get them involved in an interview process with our client, our job is to make sure they're as successful as humanly possible, right? I mean, look, not to put too fine a point on it, we all have a vested interest. Like, we as an agency generate revenue by helping people get their dream jobs, right? So anything we can possibly do to help that person have their very best interview experience, it would be silly for us not to do that. So for sure.
Nice. Another one. What if I'm already in hiring process? Do you offer a standalone service?
Not as like a service offering, but Jessica, ping me. Jason at HubSearch. Happy to chat.
Cool. All right. Any last minute questions before we end the recording?
Before people start hopping off, come to our intensive. Come in and hub along with us on July 22nd. We love it. I use it. I'll fully admit, I've been in HubSpot for 10 years. I consider myself pretty knowledgeable about it, but every time I go to one of these things, I steal ideas and I put them into my own client work. So you can do the same. Please RSVP. There's a link somewhere in the chat. Otherwise, check the email that's going to come out here in a couple hours with this recap, and we will see you there.
Great. Well, I'm going to end the recording, and then we can continue to chat here for a second. But anyways, thanks for everybody for coming out, and have an absolutely awesome day. Thanks Jason.
Thanks, guys.